Alright guys, Newcastle have just beaten Nottingham Forest right at the end of the game. And the words hard fought and well earned come to mind because I think based on the overall game, Newcastle deserved this win. It was a really good game, and it wasn't like Nottingham Forest were, just sitting back and defending completely. There were moments in the game where it was like that, but Nottingham Forest, they did have their moments throughout the game. I think at the start of the game, Newcastle, uh, maybe not dominated, but were definitely the better side. They obviously hit the bar twice in the first 20 minutes. The first one coming from Renan Lodi, actually, somehow deflecting a shot onto his own crossbar. I think it came at him quickly and he volleyed it. Didn't have much time to sort his feet out. And then Sean Longstaff obviously had a deflected effort hit the bar as well. So Newcastle really were, like getting shots off and coming close to scoring. But when as much as they did that, it doesn't feel as though Keylor Navas actually had that many saves to make. So yeah, it was a bit of a strange one really. They kept testing the Newcastle goal, the Nottingham Forest goal, and eventually, they were always going to score. But it was actually Forest who took the lead through Emmanuel Dennis. And I think this was a very good idea from Steve Cooper, because I think it is something he will have looked at before the game and noticed, and I think I've noticed it a bit myself. I wouldn't say I would have pointed it out before the game, but now it's happened, I can sort of see how Steve Cooper has noticed it. But he's basically picked up on how Newcastle's defenders sometimes, when playing balls back to Nick Pope, or playing balls, just across the back line, don't always seem to look. And I can think of a few times this season where Sven Botman's nearly been caught out by doing what he did tonight. And I do really like Sven Botman. I think he'll be a top defender in a few years. He is already a very good defender and one of the signings of the season for sure. But it was really clever to sort of double up on pressing him, with Emmanuel Dennis sort of lurking in behind, and Andre Ayew just making him force his hand and sort of play the ball. So it was a really clever decision that from Steve Cooper. But I think the problem for Nottingham Forest tonight was they had to ride their luck a bit. Obviously, they're coming up against a team who are 10 places higher in the league or something like that, roughly 10 places higher in the league. So they were always going to have a bit of luck, even at home, where they are remarkably better, getting results in football matches than they are away from home. And they did at times, but it's just a couple of sort of lapses in concentration, a couple of maybe errors, whether it be individually or even just as a team. That's what cost them today. Otherwise, they would have held on. They managed to nearly hold out until half time, but Isak got the equaliser for Newcastle literally just before half time, and it came from a bit of play down the right from Newcastle. And Forest, it just felt as though they had too many players trying to get too close to the ball, and as soon as Newcastle played themselves out of it, they got 2-on-1, and Joe Willett was able to get in a good position and cross it for Isak, and it was a very good finish from Isak as well. But I think sometimes when you're used to playing a system like Forest, I think for the majority of this season, or the majority of the past couple of months, certainly since the World Cup break, have been used to having a three-man midfield. And tonight they sort of had it with Gibbs White. Gibbs White wasn't playing as advanced as he usually does, but it was very much a two-man midfield in front of the defence in John Joe Shelvey and Ryan Yates, or Remo Freuler when he came on. But in this case it was Ryan Yates. So when you've got two midfielders, you can't be as you can't be as reckless to go and win the ball. Maybe not reckless, but I can't think of what the word to describe it would be. So keen to win the ball rather than hold your position. You've got to focus more on holding your position and make sure that it's the attacking players. So in this case, it should be Emmanuel Dennis closing the ball down, not both John Joe Shelby and Ryan Yates, because that left far too much room. And when Renan Lodi joined in as well, that's where the problem came for Forest, because it left all the space in the world in behind for Joe Willock to eventually get the cross into Isak to score. And Isak, that sort of saved him, I think, a little bit, because about 2 minutes before that, it looked as though Eddie Howe was telling Callum Wilson on the touch line to warm up as if he was coming on in the second half. Because Newcastle, as much as they did, test Forest in the opening parts of the first half, Forest had a pretty strong end to the first half. It was definitely the best part, the best bit of the game they had after that superb finish from Dennis, because I don't think I've actually mentioned that enough. Once Dennis did intercept the back pass from Botman, he did really well to finish it, because that was a superb finish to get it the perfect height, the perfect weight, the perfect power on the shot. If you give him that chance 10 times, I reckon he fails to score 8. It was a very good finish. But I think with Emmanuel Dennis, though, it felt a bit like one of his performances at Watford last season, because his goal scoring form at Watford last year was really good. I think he hit double figures for Watford, and in a relegation team, a team who get relegated, that's quite good, hitting double figures. It certainly almost means that you're going to be their best attacker, and he probably was. But he'd score goals, but he wouldn't ever dominate games, if that makes sense. He wouldn't ever be constantly involved. Like we saw in this game today, Elliot Anderson come off the bench for Newcastle at half-time and replace Sam Maximin, who had little to no impact in the first half. And Anderson, as soon as he comes on the pitch, he's closing down Forest defenders, trying to cause problems, and he was winning the ball in dangerous areas. And he was really unlucky that his goal didn't count, because he earned it. He worked his socks off as soon as he came on the pitch. That opening 20 minutes, it was the Elliot Anderson show almost in the second half. And he was unlucky for his goal to be disallowed, because that would have been a great moment. And to be fair, I'm not even sure what the rules are with offside, to be honest, because Isak has absolutely no intention of that ball getting to Longstaff. Longstaff is offside, and the ball does fall to him, but it doesn't even fall to him. It takes a deflection off him and back into the path of Isak, and it comes off via two Nottingham Forest players, Felipe and Renan Lodi, I think it was. And it's just that's not what offside's meant to be preventing, if that makes sense, because it's meant, what offside is brought in to do is basically to stop players from just sticking in the opposition's box whilst the opposition have got a corner or something, so that it's so easy to just punt one along. That's what offside's meant to be for, and it's also meant for defenders to set traps for attackers, basically. But when there's absolutely no intention for a ball to go to an offside player, and it comes off via two defenders, it does feel a bit harsh and a bit like that's not what the rule's for. But they've got to make the rule, draw the line somewhere. So I don't know. That's a whole different debate, really. But it just felt a bit harsh. And Anderson, it wasn't a good header. He managed to sort of get himself the space by not pushing Serge Aurier, but keeping his distance from Serge Aurier, felt like, and making sure he won the header. So you have to feel for him a little bit, although he definitely did add something to the game for Newcastle, because it had gone a bit stale for them just before half time, just before they got the equaliser actually. But from then, from like the 60th minute onwards, other than maybe 2 or 3 Nottingham Forest counter-attacks, it was pretty much one-way traffic for Newcastle, and they kept pushing for the goal, and it felt as though it was coming, and when the ball goes into the box in the 93rd minute, and it was just a poor moment from Niakate. He's made a return from injury. He was a bit rusty at times throughout the game, I thought, but overall he wasn't horrendous. And it's just one of them where it's, as soon as it's hit his hand, his head is in his hands, and he knows it's a penalty, and Isak dispatches it and gets his second of the game. And he's starting to make sure, Isak, that the starting spot as striker in the Newcastle team is, because Callum Wilson's been very off form since the World Cup, I think. Whereas Isak, when he's played, he's looked really sharp. So I think he's probably nailed on for the next few matches in that striker role. But yeah, Newcastle, they deserved it because they were resilient and they kept pushing. And this game was it did represent the two teams' playing style. Newcastle, it's obviously a lot about intensity, keep pushing, and they did manage to get through in the end. Whereas Forest, it was all about sort of riding their luck at times and then getting forward when they could. And on another day, Forest, if they'd have taken one of those chances they had in the second half, I'm thinking back to the one Brennan Johnson had, which Nick Pope saved. Johnson actually had a fairly quiet game by his standards, or when Gibbs White got to the byline and maybe could have put a better cross in for Sam Surridge. These moments, they were what cost Forest ultimately in this game. But yeah, I feel as though Forest will feel disappointed that they just didn't hang on until half time, to be honest, because it's one of them really where if they'd have gone in at half time 1-0, maybe that just gives the team a bit more confidence in what Steve Cooper might have been telling them at half time, in that maybe they felt as though they could actually get something from this game. So yeah, it could make a difference really, I guess, but it's just one of them for Forest. But they do need to pick some points up in the next few weeks, because they've got a tough run of fixtures, Forest, and the home games are obviously going to be vital for them, and you don't want to have a poor run of form against some tough teams, and then go into the final 5 games of the season desperately needing points, because Forest still need a good 12-13 points just to make sure that they stay up this season. There's still a good chance that they could get relegated this season, and there have been games recently where it's felt as though they possibly could have got a bit more out of that game, and that's going to cost them if they're not careful. But for Newcastle, they're still pushing for top 4, and the fact that over the past couple of weeks they've got a couple of really tight wins where they've had to work really hard for it, I think that's only going to help them, the fact that they have managed to go right until the end to get the victory. So it's definitely not impossible that they can still get top 4. Well, that's stating the obvious. There's still like a good chance they could get top 4, but it's good signs for Newcastle is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.